We're good to go.
All right. Good morning, everyone. This is Ann Bullock. Wesley had a cabinet meeting this morning that he has to lead a part of, so he could not be with us. So the purpose of our subcommittee meeting today is to discuss the model that was presented based on all of our hard work over the last year. We won't be voting on anything today. We will just be I will be just taking feedback for us in determining next steps. So the first thing is that we had a presentation that was sent to everyone that was presented to PEPSC last month based on the model. It's the first time we saw it was during the PEPSC meeting, myself as well, along with Wesley. So we did not have previous preview to the presentation. So we'll start with any questions just related to the presentation. And we're going to go through a series of clarifying questions, positive and areas of concerns, and next steps. So we're just at this point, is there any questions that anyone would want to bring up before we get in depth into these other categories that we're going to go into? And Dr. Tomberlin is here to answer all of our questions. So okay, hearing none, I'm going to ask a series of 4 questions. The first one, and I'm going to tell you what the 4 questions are that I want to ask about the model that has been presented. Now, let me just state that our goal, that I want to be clear that the model that's being presented is a starting point. It is not an ending point. So we are here to discuss the model and things that we are concerned about in the model, things we like about the model, and et cetera. So we're going to start with clarifying questions about the model. So Kim, I think it might be helpful if we brought that screen up with the model on it. And then we'll move to things that we like that we see in the model. Then we'll move to areas of concerns or things we think need to be changed, or whatever you want to put into that category. And then what are we going to do next steps based on our feedback? What are the things we need to do as a subcommittee for next steps? So thank you, Kim. I guess it's like slide 8, right? Okay. So what clarifying questions do we have on the model that was presented in PEPSC a few weeks ago? And I know there's been a lot of feedback also and a lot of things on social media and other committees have met. So let's start with clarifying questions.
So this is Rob Ellison from CMS.
Hi.
The compensation at each level, I'm assuming that is state rate, not including any supplement from the districts, correct?
Tom, that's correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Other clarifying questions?
Yes, this is Sarah Greer-Koenig. I have one. Now, would this do away with the current pay scale based on all the years together? Did I read that correct in the proposal?
Tom, these are all for you.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Would this do away with the current pay scale based on years altogether?
Yes. The only aspect of this model that where years come into play is within the renewal cycle for a licensed 4 teacher. And if you'll recall there from the presentation, a successful renewal comes, a successful 5-year renewal comes with a $5,000 increase in the salary. So that's the only place really that years come into play into this model.
Sarah, did that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am, it did. Thank you.
Okay, very well. So, other clarifying questions? Okay, I know you may have some clarifying questions as we go along. Did someone else want to ask a question? I heard a noise. All right, so I know you may have other, we may get back to clarifying questions just when other things are brought up by other people, so feel free to ask clarifying questions. And that's why Dr. Tomlin and Dr. Evans are here, to answer any questions that we have about where we are with this model at this point. All right, hearing no more clarifying questions at the moment, I'd like to move to things in the model that we like. Right? What are some things that you saw in this model from your viewpoint, just your personal viewpoint at this moment, that you liked?
So this is Rob from CMS. I like that there are multiple levels that someone is able to transition to different licenses throughout their career, and the ability to obviously make more money. So the more professional development that they demonstrate, that they can continue on with the profession. So I like the steps.
This is Maureen. I really like that this gives an opportunity for experienced teachers and teachers who are really good at their teaching profession to support teachers that are in levels or license levels 1, 2, and 3, and the apprentice teachers. I also really like that this model gives teachers who want to grow in their teaching profession but do not want to go into administration opportunities to lead in different ways, and to work with their other teachers at their school or in their district in a very collaborative way to support the education of the kids in our classrooms.
So thank you, Maureen. We have a question in the chat, Tom. I think it's a clarifying question. So I want to stop and go back to that because Alvara's microphone's not working. So I just want to make sure we check this. So could you check that and make sure? Maureen, thanks for those two things. I think those are, I love the part about, one of the things I like about this part of this model, there are lots of things I have concerns about. The one of the things I really like is the fact that you could stay in the classroom and feel like you could grow. I agree with you on that. I really like that part of it. And be valued for that, right? So, Tom, let me know when you're ready to answer that.
Sure. So, so the question is, so based on the explanation, a teacher could basically advance to the next level with $5,000 increases in 2 renewal cycles. Kind of, yes. But you need to understand that both the advanced teachers, classroom excellence, and the adult leadership are conducting their renewals of their license 4 at the, in a similar way. So, presumably, if the advanced teacher, classroom excellence, let's just take that one, if they do a successful renewal of their license 4 and continue to meet the requirements to hold that advanced license, their base salary would go up to 61 at the end of that renewal, and then they get the 10% differential on that. So they're moving up at the same rate as every other license 4. So the advanced roles are not stagnating either. Each license renewal brings a commensurate bump in their salary. I should say each successful license renewal brings a commensurate bump in their salary, and they continue to move up in the scale. So nobody's stagnating once they hit this license 4 or these professional level certifications.
Okay, I want to make sure that answered your question. So if you want to put in the chat, if you have any follow-up questions, we can, shortly, Tom will be happy to answer them. Or if that wasn't, that didn't fully answer your question. All right, other things that we like.
This is Virginia Gutierrez in Union County. I really like the option of the apprentice teacher. That someone may be able to begin in the classroom as a co-teacher with an associate's degree, because we have quite a number of those, so that could potentially be a recruitment strategy for us, as well as having the option of doing some micro credentials with, along with testing to have someone meet the licensure requirements.
All right, very good. So, all right. Anyone else? Okay. All right. How about areas of concern, things that let me just say that broadly. So this includes all the other things. Things like you might say, whatever you don't like, whatever you think ought to be changed, whatever, any of that kind of stuff. So just areas of concern on the model.
Hey, Ann, this is Chris Godwin, Campbell University.
Hi.
I have a couple of things. One, I do feel I'm concerned. I guess these would be concerns. I think there's a concern that there's an over-reliance on micro-credentials because understanding the approval process and the state approval process, I just think there may be an over-reliance on micro-credentials in the management of this entire model. I think that we understand staffing is very minimal. I'm concerned that several of our LEAs that I work with, or PSUs, have expressed concern about how in the world this would be managed as well, managed at DPI. And also, I think that I think this begs a great examination of the accountability model that EPPs are under and making sure that we're all on the same page as far as how we're held accountable, who's held accountable, because there's a lot of moving pieces, and I think that I'm not sure the playing field is level. Thanks.
Yeah, I share some of those same concerns, Chris, particularly around are we complicating it? Like we're trying to uncomplicate, right? So there's some pieces in here complicating it. And Wesley, my co-chair, also shares the concern about complication. Like, are we complicating it with some of the things that have been added? And do we need to make it more? Can we make it more streamlined and not so complicated? Particularly in like 2 and 3, right? Like, can that be a little more streamlined? So, okay. All right. So I heard over-reliance on micro-credentials, the management of the system, right? The licensure system, and the accountability model. Am I correct in my notes, Chris?
That's a good summary. Thanks, Ann.
Okay, yeah. Okay, other things from other people.
Hi, Ann. This is Vivian Covington. I have a concern that this could de-incentivize the traditional program. Maybe that's what it is designed to do. So if I am a parent, I tell my child to go to the community college. They can become an apprentice teacher, start making $30,000. Then they can, I guess, do some micro-credentials and move to license 1 in a year or so, or get up maybe 2 years. So I can make 2 years at $30K. Then I can get license 1 and make $38K, and then I'm going to get an advancement account to help me get to license 2, where I'll be making $40K. So by the time I get to license 3 via micro-credentialing, I will be vested in the state of North Carolina, and I will have made $30, $60, $90, $148,000 while working. Whereas if I go to a 4-year program and I incur debt, I'm going to get one I'm going to get 1 year at $45K, and I'm going to get an advancement account one time, and I'm not going to be vested, and I'm still going to do some micro-credentials. So I have this fear that de-incentivizes that. So that's one concern for me.
Okay.
The other is, so I could see, we already have declining enrollments in Ed Prep, which supposedly is the impetus for all of this. And so I could just change all of my programs to BAs. People could get them in a content area. they could jump in at license 1 or 2, 1, I guess, because they would have their content, but not content and pedagogy. And then they could work their way through and get paid. And I wouldn't have to do a Title II report. I wouldn't have to worry about all the GPA issues. So it seems that there's some de-incentivizing of traditional ed prep programs. Well, we know the data shows that those people are the most effective and stay in the field.
Thank you, Vivian. I think that's a very good insight. And I don't know, one of the things that I still have a concern about is it's not clear in this model, which I know is a one pager here on this page. It's not clear the role of the EPP in this model. You know, it still has a little EPP star above license 3, but it's not clear the role of the EPP here, in my opinion. And I'm concerned that if we don't make that very clear and build on the data that we do have for a state, then I'm not sure. I think your concerns are very valid. Tom, do you want to respond to anything about license 1, license 2, the EPP, any of that?
So I don't understand the argument and the and I somewhat object to the couching of the way it was presented. There is no intent, and I don't think we can have good, honest, intellectual conversations about this if this is going to be couched in there's some nefarious purpose underlying all the work that went into this. So if we could agree as a group to have intellectually honest conversations about this, that would really be helpful. That's my comment.
That doesn't answer the question, Tom.
I understand that. But in this model, Dr. Covington referenced either meeting content or pedagogy. That was the old display. That doesn't even recommend, that doesn't even reflect what's been updated in this model. The idea that micro-credentials drive the whole conversation is nowhere reflected in this model. I'm happy to talk about the merits of this model and how it can work, but I don't understand the taking everything out of context and presenting it in a way that automatically makes it sound like there is some purpose to destroy or diminish the EPPs. I don't see that at all. The pathway is very clear. In this pathway, anybody currently going through the EPP system can come out under the current way we do things today, making $45,000 a year to start.
So I think I would like to say that I think that when I look at this model, and I've said this in the last meeting, Tom, as well, that I don't understand the role of the EPP in this model. Like when you look at this model at a glance, right? I see the star of the EPP on license 3, but if you think about it as a parent, oh, well, my child, it looks like that the EPP is nowhere before you, like there's a star there with the EPP, but it's not clear in this model.
Yeah, but it is in every one of these stages in the entry-level certification. The EPP has been recognized as there has to be. We've made it a little nebulous because we did not want to put absolute definitions in here. But in every one of these entry-level models, it says that the routing of this person through the licensure system has to be done in conjunction with the EPP, with the sponsorship of an EPP or a PSU. And then in those articulations of the supports, in every case, it says, as directed by the MOU between the PSU and the EPP. So if the subcommittee does want to clarify what the absolute role of the EPP in this is, that is under the subcommittee's purview. you can absolutely write into this. One must, without exception, leverage a State Board of Education approved EPP program in order to advance through these license levels.
Can you tell me where that is on this form? I mean, honestly, I don't see it on this piece of paper right here that I'm looking at, digital piece of paper. Am I missing it?
You mean the overall guide? It's articulated throughout every one of the explanations of the license levels.
Yeah, if I could we I think maybe part of the issue is that we're focusing so much on the summary slide where you can only kind of do so much in one slide with, this is meant to be kind of like the overview, but I do think going into the details of each specific, I don't know if everyone's had a chance to do that. I have several times, but I do think these details, it is clear that, in my opinion, that DPI spent a lot of time really thinking through how it actually works. And so, yeah, I think those things may not be fully communicated in the one pager, but it might be helpful for us as a subcommittee to walk through these details a little more specifically.
We can do that. I just want to be clear that, Kim, could you go back and put the summary sheet back up, please? This is what's put out, right? When I see it on, I'm just going to say social media. This is what's put out. This right here. Like when I look at, it comes up on my Facebook page like almost every day that I look on my Facebook page, which is not every day, but this comes up, this page. So I would say one of the next steps would be to make that clear on this page. I think that's a fair next step. So I'm happy for us to go into each one in depth, and maybe that's a clarifying, and a next step would be to clarify that. So I think that's fine.
And if I could respond to Tom, I am making an intellectually sound argument, and you do have content and pedagogy still under license 2 and 3. I'm not going to split hairs with you, but I'm sorry if you feel attacked, but that's kind of the way EdPrep's felt since the beginning of this. So I'll just leave that out there as that.
Dr. Covington, I don't feel personally attacked. I feel like that it's just.
Then maybe you shouldn't personally attack me.
I don't feel like I personally attacked you. I feel like I'm saying that these comments that the goal of this model are to eliminate EPPs is not a productive line of inquiry. I mean, clearly they are not. And so let's just, if we could just, I mean, that just doesn't help the conversation move forward. If that's the issue that you're gleaning from this, then it sounds to me like the work of this subcommittee is to find a way to make sure that's not happening in this model.
Please do not assume my leadership as a way to find that's not happening. I feel like this conversation is going off on a train track wreck, and that is not the purpose. My question to the group was, do you have any concerns? I do not know what concerns people are going to bring up prior to this meeting. Period. I do not know. I did not ask anyone what concerns they were going to bring up. I have opened the floor for people to bring up concerns that they have. And so I think we need to let people, whatever they feel are concerns, they need to be able to bring them up in a safe space of this subcommittee.
Yeah, this is Jill Camness. Can I add one comment here? And just to clarify, as a member of the roundtable, and I hate to preface it with that, but that's the only way that the intention can be spoken to here. I'll just say clearly that there was no intention to disincentivize EPPs. And in fact, our thinking was that this was the opposite, and it was incentivizing, because the EPP star at license 3, we saw that as the major route that most people would still take to enter this system. And the numbers that we're talking about in apprenticeship and license 1 and 2 are just much smaller than what we envisioned coming in at license 3 through an EPP. So, I mean, that was our intent and our vision of how this would work. And I just feel like I need to share that.
Thank you, Jill. So maybe it's a marketing issue and not a model issue, right? I mean, that's one way to think about it, right? Like maybe it's the marketing piece of it and not the model itself. That happens a lot, right? In the world now. So I think that's something we can make note of and something that we could ask that's made very clear in the marketing. In the branding of this, that's made very, very clear. I think that would solve a lot of, one of the things you have to do when you put out any kind of model is try to solve the misconceptions that you see when it's put out, right? So maybe that's where we are. If people would like, I believe, Maureen, I don't remember if it was you that asked about going into this each one. We could do that. So Kim, we can move to the first.
Hey, Ann.
Yeah.
We moved on now. I was going to say, and I don't know if this is helpful or not. This is Chris from Watauga High School. One of the things from a marketing perspective that you could potentially do on that one-page document is that you could make those columns a little more narrow so that the visual aspect of it shows that kind of what's been discussed here. Now the text that's gonna be in those columns is gonna need to fit and things like that. But if you make those a little more narrow visually, then maybe that would help to clarify some things for people, because one of the problems that I think people are having is that you have the 3 columns and then you have the EPP and then you have 3 columns on the other side of the EPP. I don't know, maybe helpful, maybe not.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, Chris. And I'm not a marketer, so I don't know what it needs to look at, but I do think if this is something that's hitting people, like I said, I see the star of it in this one page that I see everywhere. I don't see it. We need to make sure that's clear, right? We need to make sure we're following our data as a state. So I appreciate that idea.
If I can also share, related to this idea, I know when I've talked to people about this, the one pager that sort of shows the whole continuum, a lot of people look at it and think you have to start at the beginning, at least at license 1, and kind of work through the whole piece. And so I guess if we're thinking about revisiting that might be also something to think about, to make it really clear that you can enter as a license 3. I think the arrows are helpful in kind of seeing where you can jump to. But yeah, I'm wondering if there's like another way to represent it to make it clear that you don't have to start at the beginning and move through. You can come in at a license 3 if you have these specific criteria met.
Yeah, that's good. Y'all are way more marketing than I am, so I appreciate that. So let's do, just as a comment of a good idea is to just look at each of these. So this is the apprentice teacher. So are the things that, well, I'll go back to the things that we like and things that I have questions, concerns, or need clarification on for the apprentice teacher. How about on this level? We've had before that someone really liked that you could be an apprentice teacher, that is something that could happen. So I'll make that note of that again.
This is Maureen. Another thing I think is really great about this licensure level is that it gives people the opportunity to be in a classroom and get the student teaching experience or get some teaching experience while being paid. For a lot of our folks who want to come into education, that's a barrier for them because they cannot do an unpaid internship for 16 or 18 weeks. And I think this offers the opportunity for people who otherwise would not be able to financially go into an apprenticeship type position to have that as an opportunity to enter the teaching career field.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
I agree with Maureen. I just, this is maybe technical, but an apprenticeship is like a registered apprenticeship is like a very technical and very prescribed by federal regulation role. And so if, on the next slide we get into this, but if you are thinking about it as operating as like a true registered apprenticeship, I think it's fine to call it an apprentice teacher. I just worry about using terminology. I think we've had similar conversations about how North Carolina uses the term resident teacher, but it doesn't actually line up with like a definition of like a residency, that we would create that same kind of disconnect between the meaning of the term and the label of the pathway. And so just want to flag that as something to maybe revisit, is the name, if it isn't going to be like a true apprenticeship, which requires, again, all kinds of like very detailed criteria be met.
Great. Dr. Tomlin, I think your hand is raised. I can't see everyone.
Yes, thank you. That is, so I just want to kind of address Melissa's comment there. That is true that there may be some confusion. Catherine Castellos is a member of this subcommittee, I think, and we have been having conversations with her. She runs the registered apprentice program for North Carolina. She's not raised any issues about the name, but she has pressed us on this question, and it does appear in some of the considerations for this license of whether the state wants to move to make this a formal federally recognized apprentice program, or are we okay with just kind of calling it apprentice without all the requirements and potential funding for that designation? So I appreciate your raising that question. She did not feel that the name itself caused any conflict with that, and unless we moved to make it a federally registered program.
Okay, thank you.
And this is Vivian. This says must work under direct supervision of a licensed 4 or higher teacher. So I would like clarification. Will this person have their own classroom of students and meet with that licensed 4 like a mentor, or are they going to be in the classroom together? That wasn't necessarily clear to me.
So this is Tom, Dr. Bullock, if I may.
Yes, I think
Yes.
it's there together is what I understand, but if I'm wrong, let me know, Tom.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. So this would be very similar to our TA role, except that this is a license and indicates that the person is not planning on staying in the classified teaching role, that this is part of the on-ramp into the formal licensure system. This would not be a teacher of record. This would not be someone only, left alone in a classroom as the instructor. They would be working under the direct supervision of a licensed 4 or higher teacher.
So I think that's important, because I think when people hear this, they see that this is going to help with the shortage, and really you're still going to have 2 people in one room. So I know it says that under the direct supervision, but I'm under the supervision of someone in my job too, but it's not 24/7 while I'm there. So I don't know if that needs a little more clarification.
Yeah, okay. I wrote that down. All right. All right. Anything else on this one right now?
So yeah, this is Rob from CMS. So I think the way that I've been looking at this is really about how people enter in and how we complicate things, and then how our teams are able to manage keeping track of people and where they are. So I guess a couple questions I have, like the requirements. Does someone have to have an associate's degree or higher? Can they have a number of hours for a degree? And what do those hours look like? Are we just talking about general, 60 credit hours in a program? And then So maybe the clarification under the license 4, under the supervision, is I go back, and maybe I'm looking at this wrong, but I go back to when we created requirements for someone to be a mentor teacher. And we discovered that many schools did not have anyone that fit the criteria for a mentor teacher. So then there were workarounds and things created in order for us, for some of our BTs to have mentors. My concern is if we define someone being under the supervision of a licensed 4 teacher, we may have schools that don't have one, and therefore create a different equity gap that is unintentional, but it pops up in this piece. So those are just, I guess, comments and questions about how tight the menu items here are for an apprentice teacher. Someone that's been a TA for 15 years may not have an associate's degree. They may have, but I look at this as multiple ways that someone can come into the profession without us creating requirements that exclude people. So there you go. I'll stop.
No, I think that's a really good, I mean, the way I'm hearing that is, are some of these things and what do we do when there's, I don't know, things that they don't have a mentor in the school. I mean, we deal with that on a normal basis, right? When you have one music teacher in the school and your mentors in another school completely because they're not in music or whatever, like if you need a content mentor. So I think some of your points are very valid. And I don't know if any of these are or. So I don't know if it's an associate degree or 60 credits, because if you have an associate's degree from a community college in North Carolina, you do have 60 credits from what I understand. So is that an or, Tom? Or is that an and?
Yeah, those are ors.
Okay. So that could be a clarification as well, right? The ors and the ands, where those go.
Yes, that would be, yeah. So semicolon or comma at the end of the first two. So yeah, they would not have to hold all three of those things to be considered. I would like to say something about that. So as the guy who receives countless calls from folks about, I would be concerned about being overly restrictive in this area, because once this is in policy, that you have to have this or you have to have this, and it has to be this configuration, then we're going to get a million calls from a million LEAs saying, hey, but wait a minute, this person is great. And I would have to stand and say, well, they don't have the 12 hours in this that the model says they have to have, or the policy says they have to have in order to be an apprentice teacher. That would be my concern. And I hope I'm addressing some of the concerns from the K-12 field that, that restrictive nature is going to be problematic, because you're going to find great people who don't have the exact right configuration, and then we would be forced to say no to that person.
Yeah, I think it's like a hard needle to thread, because on one hand, you don't want to leave people out who would potentially be good teachers. On the other hand, I can't remember if this is like how many years maximum you can be in this role, but I think there's also the need to make sure that somebody is well enough on their way to actually attaining a BA, which is required to become a teacher, ideally a BA in education, that they actually could complete those requirements before the end of their apprentice teachership period, right? And so we have to consider, I think, both of those things. And my sense, and I don't know this to be true, maybe someone from the Human Capital Roundtable could weigh in, but my sense is that's why these requirements are a little more stringent, I guess, than just a typical teacher's assistant position.
So, thank you. So there's a question in the chat from, and I'm not completely keeping up with the chat, sorry y'all. To Brad and Vivian from Jill. It says, Brad and Vivian, do we have any understanding why this shift is occurring if fewer traditional college students are choosing education? Would this new system attract more of them? So that's, there's a different conversation kind of happening in the chat. So not to get away from this, but Brad or Vivian, do you want to respond to that?
And this is Jill. I mean, I was responding to that. Both Brad and Vivian pointed out that more and more of the students they're seeing are coming in through the non-traditional pathway. Yes. So yeah. I'm just sort of trying to think that through.
Yeah. No, that's good. I thought we could maybe have a little conversation about it out loud, if that's okay, Jill.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Brad and Vivian, do you want to respond, if you may?
Sure. And this is Brad at Charlotte. I'll make just a few comments. I'm not sure I can answer that question entirely on my own, but I think it's a hiring issue. Traditional programs are not producing enough teachers, and so schools are needing to hire more and more folks who have not completed training prior to entering the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'll just add from CMS, 53% of our beginning teachers come through alternative pathways. 53%, because we don't have the traditional licensed teachers entering.
Yeah, and this is Vivian. When the cutoff was coming for no healthcare and retirement, we had a huge rush of students going through summer classes and trying to get out before that timeline. So folks are savvy, as are their parents, that there's no health benefit in retirement. There's no pay for advanced degrees. And when we get later down on this model, I have a question about if you don't want to do level 4 and be a mentor teacher, you can be excellent at what you do at license 3. It appears to me when I look at it, and I never get to make more money unless I want to mentor someone. I can't stay in the classroom and be an outstanding teacher and really grow students and ever make more than $45,000. So I think I don't know if $10,000 would make more folks come in traditionally, because that's where the starting salary is at the EPP. I think there could be other incentives there that would help, that if you come out of an EPP, then you have no more testing or micro-credential or anything to do. You are fully licensed. So I think there are some incentives that could help with that. But that's just kind of where I am. I do have a comment about this slide again, and about the previous conversation. So right now, I think it's policy. I don't know if it's law or policy, but it's out there that if you don't take the test in the first year and pass it by the third year, then you are supposed to no longer have a license. Well, we have a bunch of people who never attempt it in the first year. We don't really do anything to them. If they don't pass it by the third year, we get them a limited license. And so that conversation about finding a TA with 15 years who doesn't meet this criteria, and people calling DPI, I know they call Tom because people call me too, kind of similarly. So, I guess that's it. We have somewhere in my mind, we have to have the stomach to say yes or no, and we have to have the policies to support it. So it's not, doesn't fall on just one person to always be the decision maker, or obviously you have to uphold the policy, but that's my concern when we start talking about that, because, in that traditional PowerPoint, we said we had, we didn't have off ramps for teachers who were not effective. Well, then we say, well, but this person is effective, but there's no way to measure it. So we don't off ramp them. We create another license or gap for them to fit in. So I think that warrants a lot of conversation around this model about what are we going to stand on and for, Because we know there's going to be some folks in the gray gap.
Yes.
Vivian, could I ask a question about your comment about level 4 teachers? So I know there's 3 different types of level 4 teachers. So you're saying in the level 4 expert teacher category that you don't feel like that is that is meeting the criteria of like, I'm a good teacher. I don't want to be focused on coaching other teachers. I just want to be in my classroom doing a great job for my students. Do you feel like the License 4 expert teacher, I'm just trying to look back through, is it because they would potentially be supervising an apprentice teacher that you have concerns about it, or?
Yeah, like I'm wondering, do I have to do that at level 4? Because right now there are other people that do that, instructional coaches. So it looks like teachers would be doing more of that in order to move along, as opposed to just being, I love teaching chemistry. I want to stay in the classroom and turn kids on to chemistry. I don't want to mentor. And I can tell you there are a lot of good teachers I've worked with and we have as clinical teachers, and they're not really good mentors. They can grow a kid, but they're not really good with working with other adults. So I'm just saying it's unclear to me, I know I have to do that to get more money because I'm going to stay at 45. But do I have to mentor at expert teacher license 4? And then if I want to get more money, I have to do advanced teaching. And then while I'm helping others, if I don't meet my 3 + 5 years of effective growth of students, do I drop myself back down to license 3? So I'm unclear how those upper levels work and if a teacher has to keep doing that as opposed to just staying and being a great teacher.
Thank you for clarifying that, Vivian. It's interesting because I actually looked at the apprentice teacher, I guess, more as like a glass half full than a glass half empty. I don't know if that's the right expression here, but where I know a lot of teachers feel overwhelmed with all of the responsibilities they currently have. We've just put a lot on teachers, and I was thinking of an apprentice teacher the same way as I think about a teacher assistant role, where it's additional help in the classroom. I mean, clearly that person is learning and needing some guidance as you go, but I was thinking of this more as something that teachers would want to have in their classroom, but I would love to get other folks' perspective on that because I think I was thinking about it differently.
And this is Maureen. I agree with what Melissa just said. As a classroom teacher, I definitely saw this as an opportunity for there to be additional help in classrooms, but also to support teachers in those early years in their career. And as I look at the upper levels, what I really see is not I would have to do more work to get paid more money, but really more of here is an opportunity for you to grow in your teaching profession. And we already have teachers that are doing all those things, right? That we see in the classroom excellence teacher and that we see in the adult leadership teacher. But right now they're not being compensated. And they also don't have time really built into the day to fully support teachers that are in their beginning years of their career. So we have teachers that are doing that already, but they're taking that on and then they're finding ways to weave that into their workday. Whereas under this new model, I see it as a real opportunity for us to, number one, identify teachers that are extraordinarily good teachers that really love working with other adults, and then be able to compensate them and build in time during their day of their workday where they have the time to help other teachers, and it's designed as part of the workday. Right now, as a teacher who does mentor younger teachers, a lot of times that's happening either before or after school for me, because I don't have an opportunity during the school day to go in and work with them. So then we have to find time outside of our normal workday in order for me to assist them. And I think that this really is an opportunity for us to redefine the way that education is happening in North Carolina. We know that because of Leandro, we have to provide a sound basic education for our students. And it's not just because of Leandra. That's our obligation to our kids, right? I think that this is a way that as teachers, we can lean in and be part of that solution in providing that sound basic education, because we're going to redesign the way we're supporting teachers, which means they're able to support their students better.
Maureen?
Hey, Melissa, I would say, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to tell Maureen I love her enthusiasm. Thank you, Maureen. I love it.
Melissa, I would say that it depends on the, I think it depends on two things. I think it would depend on the apprentice teacher, and I think it would depend on the teacher that's at the license 4 level, because for our teachers who host student teachers, we have some who are more than willing to host a student teacher and enjoy that and enjoy being able to mentor them and everything that goes into that. But then we also have some who, going back to what Vivian said, they very much want to be with their kids. They do a phenomenal job. They don't really want the responsibility of mentoring a new teacher. And we also have some, the reason I say it depends on the apprentice teacher, we've had plenty of career status teachers who have had student teachers, and then they have a bad experience because of something with the student teacher, which is the only thing I can really compare to the apprentice teacher in this model right now. They have a bad experience with the student teacher, and they say, yeah, I don't really want to do that again for a while. Ask me in 3 or 4 years, and then maybe I'll be ready to do it again. But after what I just went through with them and all the extra work and all the extra meetings and, maybe even meetings with somebody from the EPP who's their supervisor there, it just takes up a lot of time, and they see it as maybe not worth it. So I think it depends on what kind of experience they have based on the apprentice teacher that they're going to have. And I think it just depends on that individual. So there you go.
Yeah.
I wonder, can I just add one thing and see what people think about it? But I wonder if, I think that makes a lot of sense about the student teacher role. It's like those people maybe have never, been in a school in a professional role before. And I wonder whether making the apprentice teacher, I don't know that we want to add additional requirements. That's why I'm throwing this out here, but having had like at least 1 year experience either in a TA role previously, or in some other type of in-school support staff role might be one of the requirements we add to the apprentice teacher role, so that it is really distinguishing them from somebody who has had no experience in schools. I think that also gives us a better indication of who is truly committed to and interested in working in schools. So maybe something to consider.
Okay. I think all ideas at this point are things to consider. All right. Let's move to the next level so we make sure this prompted a lot of good piece. Okay, so this is license 1. Any comments here?
And this is Brad from Charlotte. I think we need to be very deliberate about defining what these terms we're using around an EPP or employer mean. So we have affiliated here. There's sponsor used later. That's not enrolled, which is what we currently have. And as we saw in the chat, at EPPs across the state, we're seeing more and more folks go the residency route. And so if we don't clearly state that there is some sort of enrollment, beyond just an affiliation, I guess we should know what that means then. We're potentially having the majority of new teachers not interact with EPPs.
Right. So that's a good point. Thank you. One of the things I asked for there was a co-chair meeting before these meetings was a vocabulary list, because I didn't know what this meant. And again, I think this gets down to some of the responses you're here. It's like it does not say enrolled, even though that is different than what we've been told. Right. So I appreciate that need for that clarification. Other things on this one?
So this is Rob. I would advocate for not using something that we're used to using right now with the residency, like someone has to get hired, then they get the enrollment and we go back and forth, that, they enter the profession and they don't move to the next level until they complete a program, whether it's residency or a traditional pathway. So I think, again, I go back to trying to manage all the back and forth. That is very complicated. I know that districts hardly have any staff to be able to track that. And like in Charlotte, we just have so many teachers. We have over 1,000 one-year license holders that we're having to go back and forth with. So I would suggest maybe taking out affiliation and move to the next license level as someone that has completed a program, so that it's matter of fact. We have proof that they have done it.
Right. Okay. All right. I got that. Thank you. Again, this I think gets back to, it's not clear, the role. It's not completely crystal clear, even if it's intended, the role of the EPP. And so that needs to be cleared up in the documents. So, and what that means, right? That's what I'm hearing. What does that mean? Like, what does affiliated mean? What does sponsor mean? Can we make it clearer? So, okay. Anything else on this one?
Can you explain what it does mean? Because I still am not sure. Does the individual have to be affiliated with an EPP? Because it says or employer. So I assumed that there could be a local route, but I'm not sure exactly how to.
So there are EPPs that are not universities or colleges. So, I mean, I would throw that to Tom. I don't see where it says or on this slide. Oh, must be affiliated with the EPP or employer that guides routing. Yeah, Tom, would you like to respond to that third bullet under requirements?
Sure. So this is definitely a point that needs to be worked out by this subcommittee. We chose not to wade into this, and so we've kind of listed as between the PSU and EPP. Somebody needs to be responsible for moving the teacher through this process. If this subcommittee's decision is that guidance is directed only by an EPP, you should write that in there. If the idea is that a PSU could do this in consultation with and support from an EPP, then write that in there. We just didn't take a stand on this issue. We felt like there was enough of a question of, this question has come up several times in subcommittees. Does someone have to go through an EPP in order to complete this model? And we decided that was the work of the subcommittee to determine. We just put both options in there. So yeah, this is something that would need to be addressed by the subcommittee.
I just want to make a point that's really different than what was said before. So I appreciate you answering that, because that is different. So based on the comment earlier about completing a program and affiliation, this will be under our next steps, I believe, to determine who will guide the routing for Licensure 1. And I believe we, as the Licensure Subcommittee, should make some recommendations around that. So I'm going to put that under next steps based on that statement. Okay. Questions about that or anything else on this that we want to bring up?
I just have a question about the 18 hours, because right now we're operating with 24. I'm wondering, is 18 enough? I know we have comprehensive science licensure. That seems pretty thin for someone who's going to get a comprehensive science license. Same in math. We license 912 math to teach all subjects. So it's a high school sort of focused person. That seems thin.
Yeah.
Dr. Bullock, you raised this to me earlier, and I want to address how we came to that. So when we look back at our current system of how we kind of onboard people into the residency license, so we provide the opportunity that you can hold an emergency license if you have 18 credit hours, and then the idea is that they use that time to get up to the 24 that qualifies them for the residency license. And so that was the reason 18 was selected there, was kind of incorporating that current on-ramp into the license one. But again, all this is just placeholder. Everybody, I mean, the idea is that this is just something for you all to react to, and our hope is that you will edit these things to the right and appropriate recommendations that you want.
So that makes sense to me if that's paralleling on a permit to teach or an emergency. But I guess currently those folks have to get credit hours to get to 24. But it appears in this model that could be a micro-credential to boost content. Would that be correct?
No, I don't think so. The micro-credential is clearly displayed in this model as an alternative to the licensure examinations. I don't see anywhere in this model where it is listed as a course or a program. I think that's probably some of the confusion here. It is an alternative to the licensure exam testing. I don't see anywhere where it's established as a program for preparing a teacher.
Right. I wrote down 18 to 24 hours under next steps of something that we probably need to come back to. So, and can they start with 18 and then do we say somewhere else that they need to add in? So, all right. Anything else here?
Dr. Bullock, just one suggestion that occurred to me from what Rob said. It could be that 18 goes back into the apprentice to clarify the number of hours or what has to be in the associate's degree. That might be a good place to reconfigure that.
Okay, yeah. I think, and as I stated before, I think 18, I agree that I will say back in the day that when we went from 18 to 24, I believe that the data on how impact of teachers and knowledge of content knowledge actually really changed. So when we looked at our graduates, so as someone who prepared middle school teachers for a long, long time. So, okay, let's move to the next level, please. Okay, so this is, now they move to a teacher of record, right? So this is the first, I believe, level where they are the teacher of record. So they're moving out of, quote, the co-teaching classroom. So a question I have on this level is, how do the micro-credentials, if they're on high leverage instructional practices, how would that be equivalent to content? I see how it's equivalent to pedagogy. I do not see how it's I do not see in this presentation how it is equivalent to content.
Yeah, if they're going to satisfy the content requirement, then there would need to be micro-credentials created specifically to address content. It is certainly possible that you limit this to the demonstration of pedagogical skill. That's certainly an option, but there's nothing in here that says we've got micro-credentials for content. Those would have to be developed, but those would be based on the standards for the license area, not on this research that we're referencing here.
I'll keep going. The other comment I had on this slide is if they're within 10 points of the cut score or within 3 points of the cut score, does that mean that they just roll on, or is there a place somewhere else in this model where they retake it, or it's like we're going to lower our cut score? I didn't quite understand what that meant.
Yep. So the license, so to advance to the license 2, if they're choosing the testing route, we're recognizing that they're close to the cut, and that's the advancement. In order to move to the license 3, you would have to meet the state board defined cut score.
Okay. All right. Other comments, questions, or concerns about the license 2?
Just a question about those micro-credentials, the content micro-credentials. I think Dr. Tomlin said that they would have to be developed. Do we have any idea who or how those would be developed?
No, not at this time. We would have to know that that's the will. That would be work of the agency to develop those should this committee decide that one could demonstrate your content knowledge through some kind of practice-based or competency-based exercise.
Okay, thanks.
And the other option on this slide is the peer. And the question I have on that is, how do we know that we have inter-rater reliability on our NECES observation instrument at this point in this state?
Well, I can state that we do not for principal observation.
Right.
The idea of this is that, so there are a couple ways to address that kind of reliability or validity of this, and that is to include different multiple independent observers. And so that's the route we've taken here, is to include, it would be some part of this would be built off principal observation. Then you've got the license 4 teacher who's an expert in that content area. And then you have the students who are weighing in on whether the instruction, if they're seeing the instruction as being effective, and if the teacher is doing the things that they know their content and they're able to teach it, and that they're facilitating learning for them. And so by the triangulation here, you kind of remove that issue of bias in the system. But this is hypothetical, certainly. We don't have anything to base on other than we do know that student surveys, we don't have good data on peer observations because those don't formally come into the evaluation process, but they do occur, but we don't collect them as a state. But student surveys, of course, we've done research in the state. Those are highly correlated to teacher outcome, student outcomes, much more so than principal observations.
Hey, this is Chris again. Sorry for so many questions. I guess one thing that I would have on that is those teachers, career status teachers now that are not in their renewal year, they're not, standard 3 is not in their observation. So would we be changing, I guess, would this require a change of what that observation looks like for them if they're not in a renewal year?
Yeah, that abbreviated process is totally under the purview of the State Board of Education. It's not under statute, so that could be changed.
Okay. Because, and I guess the reason I ask that is from a principal perspective, we would need to know that if we go this route, we would need to know that you could always go in, I guess, and do an additional observation under that additional observations tab, but it would need to be done for those teachers that were in this category if it were not changed.
Yes, and we should be. I think if the committee decided this was the direction, if they wanted to include this as an option for demonstrating the competency, then we would need to change the abbreviated to reflect standards 3 and 4 rather than 1 and 4. And we could certainly make that happen. But the goal here, Chris, is not to make you do something else. We would align our standard expectations around evaluation to comport with whatever's proposed here. So I hope the message is not we're going to ask principals to do even more in the arena of evaluation than they already do, which is a great bit.
Yeah, no, you're fine. I know y'all understand that. I get it.
Melissa? We can't hear you, Melissa, if you're talking.
I'm sorry. Thank you. I had a question about the student surveys and what's already being used and whether there are questions about content in the student surveys. I guess I just wonder how well students can assess that component of their classroom experience.
So there are a couple things in that I'll try to address. So we currently don't do student surveys in North Carolina. We have historically. We've piloted two different ones. That is the one out of Ron Ferguson out of Harvard. I can't remember what the formal name is, but we called it the 7 C's. That one was piloted, and then recently Panorama has come on the stage as a national purveyor of student surveys. And North Carolina helped develop their instructional scales and other scales that they have in there. And we did some piloting in North Carolina. In both cases, what we found was the level, the tripod, that's right, thank you. When you say how well can they do, we found that the student surveys were much more predictive of the teachers' EVOS growth than principal observations were. So, yeah, they were predictive of how well teachers performed on the growth measure. Then the other question I think that's kind of inherent in your question is we found that the students below grade 3 were not able to give really good feedback. They didn't understand the questions well enough to make it really usable. So 3rd grade would be kind of your lower limit on how well a student could understand what's being asked of them.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm not questioning the use of student surveys because I do think, like you said, there is research that shows they're very predictive of teachers' overall capabilities. I think it was more about whether there would be, it says the content and pedagogy scales. And so in my knowledge, there aren't different surveys for content versus pedagogy. So I was just curious whether you were thinking there would actually be like a separate survey to assess content and another one to assess pedagogy, or whether that is just one combined survey.
So within the survey, there are within what we would consider the instructional scale, there are questions that get at both content and pedagogy. So
so they could be broken out separately. Okay.
Yeah, they could be analyzed separately.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else for this? Chris, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, it's just a little, I guess I was in many of the groupings and things that we were not very supportive of using those surveys. Just needed to make that comment.
I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I said that in most of the groupings that I was involved in this committee, those surveys were not very supported. They were some of the last things that we even decided that we would use. Just had to state that. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I think we talked about, if our memory serves, I think we also talked about the level of student, like if it's a high school, middle high school versus elementary. I think there was some conversation. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Hearing, and we have some, yeah. Yeah. So, and there's some conversation in the chat about not being supportive of the surveys as well to make note of. Okay, let's move forward. License 3. Okay, this is the one, I believe, that in the overview model has the star of EPP on the top, just so y'all know. So this, again, one of the following, we have content test or pedagogy test. There's a micro-credentialing piece in here, but again, it's only on pedagogy. There's the peer, right? There's some other things down here at the bottom. Must be observed in employer's SBE approved ITSP. What is ITSP? I'm sorry, for some reason I'm blanking on that.
Initial teacher support program, maybe.
Okay, so like a beginning teacher program. Sorry. Thank you. Sorry, I just lost it right there for a minute. All right, so any comments on licensure 3? And this will be the last one we get through today.
So I have a question. This is Rob. Yeah. So with the tests, if someone goes through a traditional path through college to, through an EPP, is that something that they would still have to take, or can the coursework and the graduation requirements be submitted in place of taking the test? And the other question I have is, like, what do we do with our out-of-state people that are entering North Carolina? And is this something that can be kind of morphed or designed to accommodate them as well? If they've already taken tests, met their state's criteria, do they need to do additional things? And is this where they would come in at? So there are several things in there.
Yeah, those are good questions. I would say that this is just my opinion. If we get to make this for one of the things that we've talked about in this subcommittee this morning is how to incentivize people to do traditional EPPs. So anything that we could suggest that could be taken out if you went through a traditional EPP, like the content and pedagogy test, if they say they've met the CTC requirements and the final NECs, and most EPPs have iterator reliability on those instruments in their own EPPs, I would think that that might be a good recommendation for us to think about. So I really appreciate those questions, Rob. Out-of-state teachers, we could make the same kind of proposal. They've met the qualifications for out-of-state. Could that be a category here? Any comments or reactions or other things about licensure 3?
And there was a question earlier from, I think, Virginia Gutierrez that said, does the pedagogy exam, I'm assuming, would include EdTPA, PPAT, or could it be the principles of teaching and learning? I thought principles of teaching and learning was still there if you wanted to add on an area and didn't have an EdTPA, but I don't know if that means just those two right now that are in the state, or could that be broadened?
I know that I don't know the answer to that. Tom, do you know the answer to that at this moment?
So the PLT is only available where there's not an EdTPA or PPAT that would I don't think PPAT is distinguished by subject area, but the EdTPA is. There are a couple CTE courses where there is not a pedagogy exam, and so we allow the PLT to function in that case. But that's the only case. The statute defines a nationally normed test of pedagogy, and PLT is not that. So there's some very specific instances where that could occur, but not in general.
This is Andrew. I might also add that the CTE is getting its own specific license era EdTPA test going forward. I think it's supposed to start this fall. So my guess is that one-off that we've done for a half dozen or so CTE folks will be shored up as of this fall.
Hi, this is Kim. I just wanted to add one thing about student surveys. I need to look back in the notes, but I believe when we voted on student surveys that it was not unanimous. There was more of a debate around student surveys, but yes, that it was voted to use student surveys. It was not.
Okay, Kim, did you look that up? I know.
I will.
Yeah, and just if we don't get it before the next 5 minutes, we can send it out to the group.
I'm sharing my screen. I can't. Looking at it, so I'll need to after.
You can't do 10 things at once. I completely understand that. But could you just send out that whole list and what we recommended again? That might be a good reminder for folks.
Sure.
So thank you. Yeah, there was a lot of debate around student surveys. I do remember that. Anything else on license 3? I was
made a larger comment in the chat, and I know not everyone will agree with me, but I just want to make the point. So we had done some research into the different measures that you can use to assess teacher competencies in different areas. And our recommendation was, as researchers, not to use things that are very qualitative in nature, where there can be subjectivity that is introduced into the process. So that would include things like peer, where it's not, the same person doing the observations. And it would also include things like any EPP specific performance assessments. And that is specifically for licensure, so not for, ongoing professional development for teachers, because I think those are actually really important elements of that. But for anything that is quote unquote high stakes, it's just really hard to say that there's this like hard and fast line, like you have a license or you don't, because of the subjective measure. And I just think it opens up the process to lots of controversy. And so I would just personally really recommend against using those types of measures. But I know that I just want to restate that because I just think it's an important piece for us to consider.
And thank you, Melissa. I'm going to push back on that a little bit, because the measures that we use in an EPP are actually state measures. So they're not all EPP created measures. They're actually measures from the state of North Carolina.
Sure. And it's not about the measures themselves. It's about the raters. So maybe there's a rubric, but unless the state is actually like doing training of all the raters and ensuring there's inter-rater reliability, and that's like a whole process, like unless that's happening across all the EPPs, then it's still a subjective process.
So in my EPP, I'll say it, let me just say it from my personal view. We do an inter-rater reliability piece on our observations consistently.
Right, so, within your EPP though, right? Not across EPPs?
Within our EPP.
Right, so that's the issue, is that it's not across state. And if you're using a state licensure process, it really has to be considered that everyone is getting equal treatment. And there's no way to do that.
We bring a person in that trained the state across the state to do it in our EPP. Like we don't train within. It's done from outside. Just to be clear from what we do here. Now, I'm not saying that's what's done everywhere.
That's what I mean. Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's not inconsistent.
But I would say that the same for principal observations, right? So I think that the inter-rater reliability piece around our state evaluation instrument is something that I would really like us to push on, because I think if we could go back to training around that instrument and be clear on that, because it's not a bad instrument. It doesn't cover every single thing we want in a modern classroom, but it does get to the pieces of teaching that I think that it has made a huge difference in our EPP in terms of feedback, and I think it would make a huge difference across the state. So I don't know that we're on different islands, but I think that it is something that I'm pretty passionate about, because I saw what a difference it made here.
Yeah, I think if you can put those training processes in place and really have true standardization around it, I just know, once you start getting more and more folks in that process, it just becomes harder and harder to do.
Right. I guess this is Vivian. From my perspective, we use the CPAST, which is out of the Ohio State University, and every at least once a year, people have to retrain on that observation tool. And so in my mind, if you're coming out of an EPP, higher ed or not, and you can show that that is being done, then, that, to me, that shows, the work that the EPP is doing, whether that be a school system or at higher ed. And should that count then, because there is interrelated reliability in there, should that count then not have to do additional exams or anything else to be licensed? So if we're already doing that work that we have to do for our accreditors, and we can show that that's being done, every supervisor that's retrained every year that works with us, that's in the field with our students, there should be some acknowledgement of that effort and that work.
Yeah. So I think that may not be known, like that might again be a marketing thing, that's not known, that EPPs do inter-rater reliability, and sometimes it's external, like ours and like East Carolina's. And so that could be something we could discuss as a piece. So Melissa, thanks for bringing up that point. I think that I think the inter-rater reliability piece is huge. So obviously I'll quit talking about it now. Okay. All right. So we are 1 minute out of time. So let's stop. Is any last minute comments anyone wants to make about licensure 3? We can pick up on this next time when we meet, if when we could start here. And I have tons of notes about the other ones.
Dr. Bullock, I have a quick comment if I could.
Sure.
Thanks. So just in general on the peer, I'm going to speak on behalf of our K-12 folks, and I very much want them to weigh in if I'm getting this wrong, but I get hundreds and hundreds of requests per year from the LEAs about, I have a great teacher and I can't get them through this system. So this whole peer review process is geared towards helping LEAs allow their teachers to establish their competency to hold the license through that process. If this is wrong, or if the LEAs don't want this kind of process, that's fine. We just included this as a recognition that they are also experts on what great teaching is, and they should have a way to assist their teachers in the demonstration of that excellence. And on the point of the inter-rater reliability, I agree that's huge, but it's really only half the question. You can have great inter-rater reliability about some kind of scale, but if the scale doesn't have predictive validity, it may not be capturing what you intend it to capture. So the question becomes, are those ratings associated with better student outcomes? And that's the question we don't know the answer to at this point.
Well, there's a lot there then. So, yeah. All right. So I have a question, Tom. Does the NESEs have predictive validity?
Absolutely not.
Then do we need to change that?
So the goal here was to put more around that were things that we think Well, in one case with the student surveys, we do know that that has predictive validity. And in the other case with the License 4 observation teachers, the hope there is that this is somebody that's working closely with that teacher. It's not a three glances at the practice and seeing if it's, and having somebody make a formal declaration about that. It's trying to build more process into that so that we could support it. And that goes back to your question of, can we do more training with principals? I think the training is not the question. It's getting them good data about what's going on in that classroom so they can make better decisions is probably what we're shooting for with this. But this is, again, this is all up for review and changes on your part. We were just trying to recognize that there are multiple ways that a teacher could demonstrate their competency to hold the license.
All right, thank you. All right, so we're gonna.
And if I could just add one thing real quick too.
Is there a second page to this? Because someone mentioned earlier that there was a 5K per year increase around something, that if someone stayed in this area. Someone mentioned that earlier in the chat, and I wasn't sure I saw that, a 5K bump. Okay.
Vivian, that's your level 4.
Okay.
But Anne, if I could just add one thing really quick too. Sorry, I know we're over time, but one of the things I think that's really powerful about the potential of this model is that it gives teachers the opportunity to demonstrate their competency and demonstrate their effectiveness in different ways. And I think that's really important because one of the main goals of our work at the beginning of this was to reduce barriers to get people into classrooms that are really effective teachers with kids. And we know that sometimes people are able to demonstrate that on a test, but we also all know that teacher who is an incredible teacher, reaches kids, forms relationships, can grow and move kids, and for whatever reason, they cannot pass the praxis. And I think that this is really powerful because it gives those teachers the opportunity to remain in the classroom, to continue being effective with our students, and to continue growing our kids. And I think that's really important. So I just wanted to make sure that was noted, that because I think that, you know, this could be a huge shift in education, but it's also scary because it's a paradigm shift, right? So I think a lot of the questions that are coming up are really important, but I also think we need to be open to reimagining the way that education is currently happening so that we can improve the educational opportunities for our teachers and also improve the educational opportunities for our kids.
Thank you, Maureen. Appreciate that. So I don't know that anyone disagrees with options. And so I think that's a good point for us to end on. It's just if the options are of quality. So, and, you know, meet the purpose of the level. So thank you for that. Okay, well, I just want to come back around and state that I thank everyone for expressing their opinions, whether they're popular or not, and where that with the clarifying questions that they have. And I hope that everyone on the subcommittee knows that Wesley and I lead this subcommittee with transparency with all of you, and that we appreciate every viewpoint that is brought forth, and that we appreciate and value that your expertise and what you're bringing that from. So I think it's important for us to all, this is a emotionally charged and change. It could be a positive emotion or different kinds of emotions are coming out anytime we try to adopt something new in our state and try to do the best thing that we can do for all of our students and all of our teachers. So I just want to thank you all for your comments this morning, and I want to thank you for your honesty and around the comments that you were making. Please know you can reach out to Wesley and I if you have want to have any kind of one-on-one conversations. We're happy to have those. If you want to reach out to us as co-chairs, we'll be back in touch with another meeting. I want to hear what we have in place from the other subcommittees that have been meeting. I have not been able to listen to all those meetings, unfortunately. So I look forward to hearing that, and keep thinking, y'all, because, you know, we have a big power piece. You know, we have some powerful decisions to make about the future of our state. So I thank you so much, and I hope you all have a great day and a great week. And try not to get blown away if you're in Central North Carolina. So thank you all. Bye-bye.
I just want to let everyone know that the next meeting's May 2nd, 1 to 3 p.m.
Thank you, Kim. All right. So, so there may be some things you think of in the middle or some things you think about, and feel free to share all this with people so that we can get feedback wide and broad that you can bring back. So,
and Anne, can you get a motion?
I thought we weren't official. Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Ms. Vivian, so moved.
So maybe in a second.
This is Sarah Koenig. I'll second that.
Thank you. And all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you. All right. Thank you all. Thank you, Kim.
You're welcome.